Ladies and gentlemen, idusach bhfuil mo bhuíochas a gháil éimeann a thugann cuireadam teachtain seo aniu agus leabhart na tithe tuaithe I dúiscut an clár. I'd like to thank Eamon particularly for inviting me to speak about the vernacular house of North Clare. I was asked by the National Monument Service if I'd survey all the vernacular houses in Clare, and I said I'd be delighted, and they say, well, you have 1 month to do it. And I said, no, I couldn't be done. So I divided the county between myself and my colleague, and I took West Clare from Loophead to Ahinish, and tried to cover every road in the west of the county. And my colleague Bert Gagan took the eastern part of the county, and we did a survey of the vernacular houses, which I'll go into now. But it was based on a survey that was carried out, or it followed a survey that was carried out in 2005 by Carrick Construction Dublin, influenced by the Conservation Service in Clare County Council. And it was basically to make a comparison what happened in the last 20 years or so. And I'm afraid the news is not good, but I'll talk about that later. Vernacular houses of North Clare, and the question of course is, what are vernacular houses? And I put them in 5 categories. Most people put them in 4, but I like to slip in my favourite buildings into it as well. So we have cob-walled houses, which are basically houses built with mud, and we have thatched roof houses, thatched houses, tin-roofed houses. Some people dispute this, but in fact corrugated iron or tin has been used in housing in County Clare since the 1860s. So I suppose at this stage we could nearly call them traditional. And then you have the stone roof or the flag-roofed houses, and then you have the tower houses, and people dispute, why do you put in tower houses there? Well, I think they fit the category of vernacular houses. They're not designed formally by architects, they're designed by tradition, they've evolved over centuries, and are built completely with local materials. And in fact, you have more tower houses in North Clare than you have thatched houses, so I don't see why they shouldn't go in there. But I'll rush fairly quickly because I think it's only 30 minutes I have to talk about it. Now, the first type of building, of course, were cob-walled or mud houses. They were very common in late medieval times, and very common up to the time of the famine, and kind of disappeared after the famine. There were class 4 houses in the survey of the quality of houses in Ireland. I think was carried out in the 1840s and again in the 1860s. And they were known as the class 4 houses. They were generally 1 room, and they were built with a base of stones, and above the stones then you had a mixture of stones and mud, or mud and straw. And there are very few of them left in Clare. And what you get is very little. This is one out near Cronin, near Kilrush. And basically it's overgrown with ivy now. You could, a few years ago, you could actually walk into it and see the 2 rooms that were in it. But that's about all that's left now, unfortunately. And the only reason that wall survives is because the plaster survived on it. Unless these houses were maintained, they were going to go back to where they came from, back into the ground again. And the only way to maintain them was to keep them plastered in lime and whitewashed every few years, and make sure there was a good overhang of thatch over the walls to keep the water off them. They don't survive in this climate. They're not suitable for the west of Ireland, really. Much more suitable for the east of Ireland or for England. And they do survive a lot better in England and Wexford and Kilkenny and Carlow. In fact, there's the famous house of May Glass that the Heritage Council poured a fortune into over the years to repair, a 2-storey farmhouse down in County Wexford, built entirely of mud. So they're not to be looked down upon. They would have made quite suitable houses at one stage, but as I say, only if they're maintained and not really in the west of Ireland climate. So I think we can dispense with cobwalled houses as far as this county is concerned at the moment. The next type, of course, are detached houses. And again, you have various types of thatch buildings. You have the vernacular thatch building, of which this is not one. This is a house, I would say, built in the 1960s or 70s, and thatched. Very nice design and all that, but it's not an old stone house. So you have the vernacular buildings, you have the commercial buildings, pubs, restaurants, and then you have holiday homes, are modern houses built and covered in thatch. That's a more vernacular house. Now we can see from the style that's in. Actually, it isn't. It isn't a vernacular house, but it's a very nice design. It's in Ballyvaughan. I think it's one of the holiday cottages in Ballyvaughan. Yeah. It's hard to keep up with them all. There's another one in Ballyvaughan. Again, nicely designed, and it does reflect the vernacular tradition, but it's not an old house. There's one in New Quay. It's Michael Cusick's cottage. Just as well I wrote it down. And again, it is a vernacular house. You can see by the stone walls and the thatched roof. Now, it has been altered. There's no doubt about that. The gable has been raised. It wouldn't have had that height of gable, and it was probably plastered originally, because from medieval times, late medieval times onwards, everything in Ireland was plastered. Churches, cathedrals, castles, tower houses, hall houses, everything was plastered. So the fact of showing stone is really just a building material and was never designed to be shown unless it's ashlar or formally cut blocks. Donegal, that's a very nice vernacular house. I'm not happy with the plaster finish on it and the nice little fairy bumps, but they wouldn't have been very vernacular. But the style of the house is, it's in very good condition, has been rethatched, which is unusual. There's another one, Cronin. I think that's up in Fenor as well, or Doolin, Cronin. Now, I was talking to the owner of that, and he intends to have it thatched very soon. But the difficulty really is the cost of thatching. There are government grants, but they don't really make a huge incursion into the cost. Years ago, when most of our houses were thatched, it was the owners that thatched them, the farmers. Like most farmers can do almost anything. They can repair tractors or fix water pumps or build walls or thatch houses. But I'm afraid that day is gone, and now you have to get professional thatchers in to do the job, and it works out very expensive. And unless there's an income from it, unless it's a commercial building, I can't see them surviving. There's the type of buildings that do survive better. A very modern house with a thatched roof on it. That's Paulnagun in Lisdoonvarna. Personally, I don't know why that house was thatched in the first place. I can't see any advantage in it. Maybe it looks cute, but it's a very expensive way of making your house look cute. Can't see the point of it. There's a very fine thatched house from the late 1700s in Spanish Point. Unfortunately, it's deteriorating fairly fast. It's been thatched for over 200 years, and I have a feeling it's not going to be repaired soon. I don't think there is an occupant at the moment. And it's a pity, because it's very visible and on the Wild Atlantic Way and on the tourist route. Moving on then to, as I say, tin roofs or corrugated iron roofs. These are actually in worse condition because nobody really wants to maintain them at all. Some people would argue that they're no great loss if they go, but at the same time they are part of what we were. And this is a house in Corrafin. Unfortunately, the owner passed away last year, so I can't see that being re-tinned, that roof. It was a very good building material. Knocknagilloch Knocknacullia. I think it's outside Ennistimon. And again, you can see even though the roof is perfect, the house is derelict, and I can't see anyone moving back into it. There's one Caherbarna up near the scanner, north of the scanner at Derreen north of the scanner. And again, you can see on one side it has the stone roof on the outbuilding and the corrugated roof. And you say, why is that? Why would you put a corrugated roof? Well, the answer, I think, is fairly simple. When people were slating houses, they started by slating the outbuildings. The residence or the family home was usually thatched because people considered that thatch was far superior material to slate. And indeed it was. Even though slate would probably last longer, thatch is much warmer and much more efficient. So people used to slate the outbuildings and thatch the houses. Now, when the thatch fell into disrepair or when it was in poor condition, very often they covered it with corrugated iron. And you'd find the thatched roof under the corrugated iron very often. So that's why you have a corrugated iron roof on a house and the outbuilding thatched, the outbuilding slated. That's the Crosses of Anna, a lovely little vernacular house there with, again, a corrugated iron roof on it, probably originally thatched. There's an unusual building in Milltown Malbay. It's next to the petrol station on the Spanish Point Road. It's a unique survival, really. It still uses an office and still has its galvanized roof on it. There's one in Milltown Malbay. It's a new roof to replace the original galvanized roof. The profile is slightly different in that the ripples are wider, but nevertheless, it's basically the same type of building. I put that one in, that's from Wales. And I put that picture in because what surprised me one time, reading a little book you might have come across by Mrs. Knox, 2 months in Kilkee. And I think it was late 1830s, she spent two months holidaying in Kilkee. And she was a great social journalist, and she wrote about everything and everyone she saw while she was down there. And she was very impressed with how generous the people were, even though they were extremely poor. It was only 10 years before the famine. But she said they have a habit of painting their houses white, not just the walls, but the roof as well. And there would have been a lot of stone slate roofs in Kilkee at the time. And this is the description of what she outlines in her book. Now, I've never seen one, but a friend sent me this photograph from a house in Wales where the roof and walls and everything is painted white. So I presume Kilkee must have looked like one of the Greek islands one time. Still on stone slate roofs. This is one, Burns in Ennistimon. It was repaired about 10 years ago, and is a lovely little music shop now at the moment. And again, he repaired the stone roof, which was great. We've listed most of the stone roofs in North Clare, made them listed buildings, but it doesn't make life any easier when they need repairs, and it's difficult sometimes to get suitable stone for the roof, a suitable flagstone. You see, some roofs are in the scanner flag, and some roofs are in Luach flag, which is totally different, but a very nice material. And some are from local quarries. Again, a typical stone roof from Doolin area. And of course, there was a whole village based on the supply of stone slates in Doolin, Doonagore village. There's great photographs of it from the late 19th century. And there's only about 1/3 of the buildings left now in the village, but it's still impressive. A lovely terrace of 2-story houses, everything roofed with the scanner flag. There's one we lost, unfortunately, in Ennistimon on the main street. Again, nearly all of Ennistimon was roofed with stone. including the Falls Hotel at the end of the 19th century. And we've kind of lost them bit by bit. And the council is doing its best to save as many as possible. There's one that was recently saved in Kilfenora, Ballycairn House in Kilfenora. And it's a new roof, but it's actually a stone roof, believe it or not. The stones were, the slates were cut very well, cut and squared up very well. It was, the job was completed by Tom Howard, the builder there in Kilnaby, and in fact he got a commendation from the Heritage Council for the quality of his work on that job.
Where did he get the stone?
One of the quarries in Luach in Doolin was providing enough stone for him to get it. I went back to them afterwards, many years later, and it closed down. They were only producing flagstone for paving after that. I think the saws gave up on them and they were too expensive to keep cutting them, you know. It's a very hard material. But a lot of the salvage yards still do that, you know, that material. There's a gate lodge above in Liscannor. I think it's Seafield House. And even though Seafield House is gone now, it's a ruin, but the gate lodge is still inhabited. And again, a stone slate roof on that. Practically all the roofs in North Clare were stone slate. The most southerly one that I've seen of Liscannor slate is in Corrafin. It's a small little cottage in Corrafin on the road to Rouen. But I've seen a man recently reslate a house in stone outside Kilrush on the Ennis Road. And I had a chat with him there when we were doing this survey. And I said to him, where did you get the stone? I said, first, where did you get the slate? I said, the quarry is up 2 fields up the back of my place. And it's where my grandfather originally took the slate from, so I did. And I said, why did you do it? He said, I just liked it. I said, fair play to him, you know. It was great. It's on the main road too, so it's worth looking at. Now, getting to the tower houses, I think these are very vernacular because they were built with local material, local stone, local lime, local timber, local slate, and the only thing that they imported for the tower houses was glass for the top windows, and only the top windows had glass, and lead for the roof, although very often the flashing in the roof was just made with a good quality lime where they couldn't afford the lead. But we did excavations here in Dysart and we came up with the slate that was on the roof. Very heavy, very big slates, the size of that, with dowel holes drilled in the top. And they were fixed to the roof with oak dowels. It's a practice that I still have seen. Well, no, that survives in Ennis. The old ground, the part that's facing onto O'Connell Street there, the very end of the building near the cathedral, and that was re-roofed about 15 years ago. And the trusses inside were all pegged together with oak dowels, as are buildings near the Friary and the Cloister pub next to the Friary, and various other buildings around the county. The oak dowels survived well into the late 18th century. It wasn't that these people didn't have nails, of course they had, but they didn't trust them because nails would rust. Any amount of moisture will rust a nail, whereas the oak dowel will probably last centuries if it's kept dry. Now, the other thing I was going to say regarding stone slate roofs, when I was working in the council, my assistant was a girl called Sarah Halpin, who is now a conservation officer in the Dunleary-Rathdown area in Dublin. Now, she did a very good survey of stone roof buildings in North Clare. Not only did she survey the survivals, but also the methods of repair, the methods of drilling slate. And she produced a very good booklet on slating your house with stone slates. And if anybody wants it, it's free. And just send me an email saying I'm looking for the guidebook or the guidelines for stone slates, and I'll send you Sarah's work. She has no problem with that. So my email address is very simple. It's Dick Rua, from when I had red hair, dickrua@gmail.com. So if you think about it, I'll send you off, or if you have an interest in stone slates and stone roofs. Still on the subject of tower houses, this is one in Faunaruska. And again, we're going to lose these buildings if we don't make sure the ivy is cut on them. That's basically the main problem they have, is ivy and nothing else. Now, this one doesn't have ivy, and this is a photograph of Faunaruska, just above Fenor Beach, up about 200 feet. An O'Loughlin tower house. The O'Loughlins were the only ones that built round tower houses. They built that one, and they built Newtown in Ballyvaughan, the Art College. And they built Doonagore, overlooking the Aran Islands at Doolin. But I was upstairs in the third story, myself and Martin Breen, when we were surveying the early 90s. And there's nothing now, only a pile of stones. The whole thing has collapsed. And I think it was damage that happened to it from ivy, even though that photograph doesn't, but that photograph is from Dr. George McNamara in the 1890s. And I think what happened is the ivy took over after that and ate its way through the building. You can see it starting there on the left-hand side. There's Glenina, again in the Burn, another very fine tower house of the O'Loughlin's. The scanner. The main part of the scanner has collapsed, and quite a bit has collapsed since that photo was taken in the 1990s as well. Shan Muckinish, which collapsed the day of the earthquake in Lisbon. I think it was 1755, the Lisbon earthquake. A huge earthquake. It demolished the city of Lisbon and sent a tsunami up the coast, which wiped out the Irish and English fishing fleets in one night in 1755. It also cut off part of County Clare, which was Ahanish in our county. If you want to get to Ahanish Island now today, or Ahanish, you have to drive through County Galway to get to it. But before the earthquake, you could drive from County Clare. So it made quite a difference. Balnagown, Kilshenny, that's Smithstown, and that has been repaired since and is now inhabited. And is that it? That is it, it seems. So just to finish up what I was saying there about vernacular buildings, I had to write a report when I was finished my survey for the National Monument Service and the Office of Public Works. And I'm afraid the report was not very optimistic about the state of tower houses and, or not tower houses, but vernacular buildings and what's going to happen to them. What's going to happen to my glasses? Anyway, not to worry, I'll see if I can read this. So basically, what I was saying was that unless we are very positive towards maintaining or repairing or conserving our vernacular buildings, they are going to disappear in the next 20 years. Thatch is a serious problem for a lot of reasons. The main reason being insurance. It's very difficult to try and get insurance for a thatched house, and if you do, it'll cost you 3 times what it would have cost you 10 years ago. There's no real excuse for it. There's not that many thatched houses burned. But nevertheless, because there isn't enough competition in the market, the price has gone sky high. And there's a lot of people living in thatched houses with no insurance. And even a lot of commercial buildings don't have insurance. I've recommended, but I've done this over 20 years, I recommended to the various state agencies that they would set up a state insurance company, a non-profit making insurance company, to cover vernacular buildings particularly, or archaeological sites that can't be insured otherwise. Another problem with thatch is finding thatch. A lot of it is imported now. It's imported from Turkey, particularly reeds. They can be got here, but they're very expensive. A lot of farmers years ago used to thatch with what they had on their own land. Straw from wheat, oats, barley, rye. But because they were cutting the wheat with a scythe, it meant you had the length long enough to thatch a house, whereas everything now is churned up by various harvesting machines, and when it comes out the other side, it's absolutely useless. So even if the government were to set aside some land that would be cut and harvested properly so as that the straw would be useful for thatch, would be another great help. The same with stone roof buildings. You have to encourage the supply of stone from the quarries. The quarries in North Clare are small quarries. It's not worth their while cutting huge amounts of stone with using very expensive blades and diamond cutters and all that, if they're not going to sell them immediately. And again, there has to be some contribution made by government towards this. All the material is there, all the quarries are there, but it's just not competitive and it's not viable to cut the stone. And our stone roofs are as good as any slate you'll get anywhere in the world. Even I was surprised that when they roofed Ennis Abbey about 15 years ago, they put Welsh slate on it. And it was a pity, because the original slate was probably quarried locally. It might have been Cronin or down in Quinn, or it was probably quarried locally. The slates that came off Dysart Castle were quarried in a hill just above the castle, which Michael McMahon, historian Cronin, told me was known as Knocknaslina, which means the hill of the slates. So slates are available everywhere. They're found down in Carrigaholt and beside the pier. They're found in various places around Kilrush. But it's just to incentivize people to open a quarry and produce the slates again. Some of the statistics gleaned from the vernacular survey were as follows. The condition of thatched houses in West Clare particularly, and North Clare. Holiday thatched houses, 80% of them were good, 20% were poor. Modern private houses, 90% were good, 10% were poor. Commercial buildings, 90% were good, 10% poor. Vernacular houses, only 60% were good, 40% were poor. And vernacular houses regarding habitation, only 70% were inhabited and 30% were more or less derelict. So this, as I say, is a poor reflection on the last, on how we treat our vernacular houses. And if we do want them to survive, we're going to have to put some effort, either financial or otherwise, into keeping them on the landscape. Another thing is to provide apprenticeships, which is not happening at the moment, for thatchers, for slaters, carpenters, plasterers, lime producers, etc. Okay, I'll take a breath. Thank you.